A military dog froze at the edge of a helicopter ramp, refusing to move, refusing to obey. At first, it seemed like hesitation, but seconds later it became clear. He had sensed something no machine could detect. What followed unraveled a hidden sabotage and saved lives. This isn't a story about technology. It's about trust. If you believe in the unspoken bond between handler and canine, stick around. Like the video, subscribe for more true stories that go deeper than action, and tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? The morning at Elwood Airfield didn't begin with the usual rhythm. The base, normally humming with the quiet order of early morning operations, felt subdued under the gray Minnesota sky. April had brought the kind of damp cold that settled into bones and uniforms, and as the first rays of sunlight pushed through thin clouds, the fleece lining doing little to ease the sharp air, she walked briskly across the tarmac toward the K9 unit's outdoor enclosure, clipboard in hand, a hot travel mug of black coffee in the other. Everything about her posture said control, professionalism, routine, except for the small frown that had begun to crease between her brows even before dawn. Inside the enclosure, Axel sat still. Too still. That was the first sign. The Belgian Malouin, 5 years old and built like a compact, muscular machine, usually greeted her mornings with anticipation. He was an early riser, just like her, often pacing, whining softly, ready for the day's work. But today, he hadn't touched his food. The stainless steel bowl filled with his favorite chicken and kibble blend sat untouched, steam still rising in the chilled morning. Lena lowered her clipboard slowly, approaching the gate. "Morning, Axel," she said softly. No tail wag, no bounce. Just a pair of alert, unreadable eyes watching her as if something far more important than breakfast occupied the dog's mind. She unlocked the gate, stepping in with the calm, firm authority that came from 8 years of working with canines. She crouched beside him, rubbing the side of his neck. His body was warm, heartbeat steady, coat clean, no visible sign of distress. But that distant, unreadable stillness set her internal alarms ticking. "Not hungry?" she asked quietly. Axel leaned against her for a moment, then stood and walked toward the far side of the enclosure, facing the hangars. Lena followed his gaze. Out on the tarmac stood the Falcon 12 helicopter, a sleek, Madak bird that gleamed under the early light. It was the pride of the VIP air unit, equipped with every upgrade and every precautionary sensor known to military-grade transport. It had arrived yesterday afternoon from its scheduled maintenance rotation. According to the checklist she had reviewed last night, all systems had cleared. No anomalies. All was green. Still, a ripple of unease passed through her. Lena walked Axel back toward the prep station. Today was a dry run, a full-scale exercise simulating a potential VIP evacuation route, involving 2 helicopters, an escort vehicle team, and a simulated threat response team. The governor of the state wouldn't be there, of course, but the protocols had to be followed to the letter. Any lapse would be noted, any delay criticized. Inside the briefing room, staff were gathering. Lena nodded to a few familiar faces. Flight engineer Tasha Lang, co-pilot Devin Marks, and a couple of newer officers from logistics who looked like they hadn't had enough sleep. She reached for the flight manifest and glanced at the maintenance records for Falcon 12 again, this time focusing more closely on the entries from the past 72 hours. That's when she saw it. The tail boom assembly had been replaced. Her brow furrowed. Replaced? That wasn't part of the last damage report. And there was no memo, no team briefing, no alert. In her line of work, surprise maintenance was never a good thing. Changes like that were logged and broadcasted to all operational teams, especially canine handlers like herself. The tail boom wasn't a trivial part. It was critical for in-flu stabilization. You didn't just swap that out without notifying the chain. She pulled up the timestamp on the digital maintenance entry. 2 days ago. It didn't sit right. Lena tapped a quick message to the maintenance crew chief on base, requesting confirmation. As she waited for a reply, she stepped outside again, watching as Falcon 12's rotors turned slowly in standby mode. The pre-flight crew was doing their routine walkarounds, checking seals, connectors, visual integrity. Everything appeared textbook. But something in her gut, the same gut that had once saved her life during a botched extraction drill in Kuwait, said, "Something's off." Behind her, she heard Axel let out a low whisper, not a bark but a sound of recognition. She turned to see him staring again toward the helicopter, ears pricked, stance alert. She knelt beside him and whispered, "You're seeing something, aren't you?" No answer, of course. But in his silence there was no hesitation. Later that hour, after initial briefings concluded, Lena approached Captain Rourke, the airfield coordinator. "Sir," she said, quietly enough not to attract the others, "who authorized the tail boom swap on Falcon 12? He frowned. "Tail boom? That bird just cleared full inspection. If there was a part replacement, it would have been routed through engineering and flagged in your team's log." "It wasn't," she replied calmly. "And I'd like to know why." Rourke scratched his head, then motioned toward a staffer. "Pull the records from logistics, and get me Reyes from maintenance." 10 minutes later, Reyes arrived, red-eyed and flustered, holding a tablet. "Ma'am, sir," he began, "we did replace the boom. There was a microfracture in one of the older models, a structural integrity concern. But it passed vibration tests after we swapped it. Nothing's flagged." "Why didn't we get a systems alert?" Lena pressed. "Not even a notice of structural change?" Reyes glanced down at the tablet. "Looks like someone filed the update under non-urgent. A junior tech probably mislabeled it as internal configuration instead of mechanical swap." Lena stared at him. "You're telling me a structural part was replaced and miscategorized?" "It happens," Reyes said, too quickly. She didn't reply, but the tension in her spine tightened like a wire. Behind her, Axel sat at attention, silent but ever watchful. As the morning wore on and crews began loading gear, Lena reviewed her mission checklist with mounting wariness. She couldn't shake the image of Axel, untouched breakfast still sitting in his bowl, gaze locked on that machine as if it wasn't a tool but a threat. The morning continued with a stiff wind rising across the field, carrying with it the scent of jet fuel, cold metal, and damp concrete. Lena tightened the Velcro strap on her gloves as she clipped Axel's lead into her belt loop. The wind lifted Axel's ears briefly, but his focus never wavered. The Falcon 12 loomed ahead like a sleeping predator, all matte curves and dark blades. Its side hatch stood open, the interior already loaded with mission packs, audio gear, and the silver containment crates that housed sensitive detection equipment. The rest of the team was ahead, already inside the pre-flight perimeter, but Lena preferred to walk Axel in herself, giving him the chance to acclimate to the airframe's proximity. Normally, he'd pull slightly ahead, ears flicking curiously, tail steady, not wagging but confident. This morning, as they approached the tape marking the security line, he did something unexpected. He stopped, dead still, no hesitation, no faltering steps, just full-body resistance. His paws planted on the tarmac, back legs locked, front legs braced. Lena nearly jolted from the sudden tension on the leash. She looked down. Axel's body had stiffened, head tilted slightly forward, nose twitching rapidly, scanning the direction of the aircraft with the kind of focus that wasn't behavioral, it was instinctual. His eyes tracked the body of the helicopter like a predator measuring threat distance. "Axel," Lena said under her breath, stepping slightly ahead and giving a gentle tug. "Let's go." Nothing, not even a glance at her. That wasn't disobedience. That was a lurk, not full detection behavior, not yet. But the stance, defensive, rooted, was unmistakably not part of the standard pre-flight routine. She squatted beside him and whispered, "What is it?" No growl, no bark, just that silent tension. That's when she noticed it. A small trail, a nearly invisible line of darker sheen, cutting across the concrete under the belly of the Falcon 12. At first glance, it could have been a shadow, but in the angle of the rising sun, it shimmered, thick and slow. Oil. Not a puddle, not enough to trigger alarm, but enough to catch a trained eye. Lena followed it visually. The trail led back toward the midline undercarriage, where the internal mechanics of the tail stabilization interface connected with the central hydraulic system. She blinked. A leak that small wouldn't necessarily compromise the machine. Not immediately. But its presence so soon after a major part replacement, that was another red flag. She stood up, eyes still fixed on the line, and called out, "Ree?" The maintenance officer, still tapping on his tablet, looked up from across the field, eyebrows lifted. "Yeah, got something here." He jogged over, his steel-to boots thudding against the concrete. Axel hadn't moved. He remained in his planted stance, watching everything. Reyes followed Lena's finger toward the faint leak. Oil? She asked flatly. Reyes crouched, swiped a gloved finger across the sheen, and rubbed it between his thumb and forefinger. Hydraulic fluid, he said after a moment. It's minor. Could just be some overpressure discharge from startup checks. Is it dripping now, though? Lena's tone didn't shift. Bird's not even under power yet. Reyes shrugged. Residual. That line connects directly to the tail rotor stabilizer. So it's possible the techs didn't tighten the access valve after the test rotation. We've seen it before. But we haven't seen it from this aircraft before, Lena said, leveling her gaze at him. And it had a full tail boom replacement 2 days ago. Look, I get it, Reyes replied, his voice edging into slight irritation. But if it were critical, we'd see pressure drops in the diagnostics. We haven't. He stood, brushing his hands off. It's cosmetic, ugly but harmless. Then she looked at Axel, who had lowered his head, ears still forward, body tense. If it's nothing, she said, why is my dog acting like that? Reyes hesitated, then glanced toward the cockpit where Rourke and the co-pilot were finalizing their checklist. He's a dog, he said. They react to things we don't. Maybe it's the smell, maybe it's the nose. Does alerts. She unhooked his lead gently, allowing him to move at his own pace. He didn't bolt, didn't bark, didn't pay. Instead, he walked forward in a slow, deliberate arc, nose close to the tarmac, tracing something. The light? No, his path diverged from the oil and moved instead toward the back end of the helicopter, toward the tail joint, as if he was picking up something else, something unseen. Lena followed a few steps behind, her boots making almost no sound on the concrete. See? Reyes called after them. If he really... You don't know this dog, she said without turning back. Axel stopped at the rear left landing skid, his body now angled toward the boom junction. He sat. That was new. A full sit, calm, not in distress, but fixed as if watching the helicopter was now his only purpose. That kind of behavior, Lena knew, wasn't passive. It was purposeful. He wasn't waiting. He was... She knelt beside him and looked again at the undercarriage. The fluid had almost stopped dripping. Reyes wasn't entirely wrong. There wasn't enough to declare it a leak by regulation. But there was enough to know something had gone unsealed. And that could mean something bigger. She scanned the back rotor assembly, eyes flicking to each bracket, bolt, and strut. Nothing looked amiss. She stood slowly, one hand resting on Axel's shoulder. The tension in her gut hadn't eased. In fact, it was growing. The problem wasn't what she could see. The problem was what she couldn't. Something was off. Her partner felt it. And she knew from experience. Axel didn't stop for no reason. Lena stood perfectly still, her boots aligned with the yellow caution paint that marked the helicopter's perimeter. Axel sat beside her like a stone sentinel, his gaze fixed unwaveringly on the tail assembly of the Falcon 12. The oily sheen on the tarmac behind them had begun to evaporate, leaving only a trace of doubt in its wake. But Lena's instincts remained sharp, anchored not in data but in observation. Specifically, in the behavior of the one partner she trusted more than any human on this base. She turned as footsteps approached. Captain Rourke arrived with Reyes trailing just behind, both clearly annoyed, though attempting professional living. Lieutenant Brooks, Rourke began, his tone clipped but even. I've just reviewed the flight diagnostics. Every system reads normal. Pressure, torque, stability, all within parameters. The oil, Lena asked plainly, not bothering with formality. Rourke glanced at Reyes, who answered, traced to a minor vent valve overflow. Not abnormal during cold weather startup. We've logged dozens like it this year alone. This aircraft hasn't flown since the part replacement, Lena pushed. That detail wasn't logged until I asked. Rourke folded his arms, voice firming. Look, I appreciate your diligence. You're one of the sharpest handlers we've got, but you're not a mechanic, and this bird's telemetry hasn't raised a single red flag. With respect, sir, Lena said, keeping her tone steady. My dog is raising one. Rourke's brows rose slightly. You're grounding a federal security drill based on a hunch? Or grounding it based on trained alert behavior, she clarified. You know Axel's record, he doesn't react without cause. Dogs pick up strange things all the time, Reyes cut in. Different smells, noises, vibrations. Hell, he might be responding to his own reflection in the fuselage. That's not how he works, Lena replied. eyes narrowing. And we both know it. Rourke exhaled, clearly struggling to balance protocol with doubt. You have 15 minutes until wheels up. The Secretary of Public Infrastructure is expecting a secure escort simulation, and the weather's narrowing our window. Unless you have empirical evidence, something beyond canine behavior, we proceed. Lena opened her mouth to respond, but Axel moved first. In a fluid, decisive motion, he turned, lowered his head, and clamped his jaws gently around the nylon strap of Lena's backpack. Then he pulled. Hard. It wasn't aggressive, not a warning bite, but a direct tug. Insistent and deliberate. Lena stumbled backward half a step, surprised not by the physical pull, but by the sheer intention behind it. She said, startled, "Hey, what are you?" But he didn't release. His teeth gripped just tight enough to move her, to redirect her away from the aircraft's boundary. His eyes, sharp and alert, flicked from the tail rotor to her face and then back again. "What the hell is that about?" Rourke asked, sounding more unsettled than irritated now. "He's never done that before," Lena admitted, her voice low. "Ever." Axel finally released the strap once Lena had taken 3 steps back. Then he positioned himself between her and the helicopter, body stiff, stance wide and tail down. It was not a protective stance. It was barrier behavior. A blockade. "That's not nerves," she added. "That's refusal." "Dogs don't refuse missions," Reyes said under his breath. "This one just did," Lena answered. Rourke pinched the bridge of his nose, frustration blooming visibly across his face. "Look, I'm not invalidating your instincts here, but we've got 6 agencies watching this operation. You're suggesting we hold launch based on behavior that could be interpreted any number of ways. Would you get in that bird if he stood in your way?" she asked. Rourke paused but said nothing. "Let me rephrase," she continued, soft but unwavering. "Would you put the secretary in it?" Behind them, the second Falcon chopper was beginning pre-flight sequence, rotor blades cutting the air with mechanical rhythm. Nearby officers watched the exchange with curious glances, some pausing in their tasks. The energy around the aircraft was shifting, not chaos, not yet, but uncertainty creeping in like mist. Reyes cleared his throat and pulled out his tablet. "We can rerun diagnostics," he offered reluctantly. "Maybe there's something we missed in the tail assembly. We'd need authorization to open panels," Rourke muttered. "And we're out of time." "Authorization can come from Security Command if needed," Lena said. "I'll take full responsibility for the delay." Rourke looked at her for a long moment. "You know if you're wrong, this sticks to your record." "I'd rather carry that than ignore my dog," she said. "We've flown hundreds of times together. He's never pulled me back." Reyes exchanged glances with Rourke, then gave a barely perceptible nod. "We'll run the tail diagnostics, but it'll take time." "Then start," Lena replied, stepping back with Axel. "I'll keep him out of the way." Rourke turned toward the command tent to call in the delay, muttering something into his radio. As he walked away, Lena knelt next to Axel, gripping his collar lightly. "It is. You smell," she whispered. "What's in there?" Axel didn't respond, but his focus never shifted. He was still watching the Falcon 12, not with aggression, not with anxiety, but with the unwavering tension of something deeply, viscerally wrong. Lena followed his gaze and, for the first time, noticed something she hadn't before. There, near the bottom of the boom, just below the panel Reyes had mentioned earlier, was a smudge, faint but sharp-edged like the print of a gloved hand or a rag hurriedly wiped. It didn't match the maintenance crew's usual clean work. It wasn't a diagnostic sign. It was human, and rushed. Somewhere in her memory, a training session echoed. Contaminants, residue, abnormal maintenance marks, small signs that mean someone's been somewhere they shouldn't. She didn't say anything, not yet. But the weight of that detail, combined with the leak, the misfiled maintenance, and Axel's refusal pressed down like fog before a storm. The murmurs around the Falcon 12 grew louder as the delay extended past the 10-minute mark. Some officers stood idle, watching Lena and Axel from a distance, while others shifted nervously, casting occasional glances toward the command tent. The atmosphere wasn't mutinous, but tension rippled beneath the surface. No one liked a stalled launch, especially when it involved federal oversight and cross-agency coordination. Lena stood to the side of the tarmac, her hand resting lightly on Axel's back, eyes scanning the aircraft again. Her gut wouldn't settle. Her mind kept returning to the faint smudge below the tail panel, the odd behavior of Axel, and the thread of hydraulic fluid on the concrete. None of these alone proved anything, but together they whispered something foul. She walked back toward Reyes and Captain Rourke, who had just stepped out of the command tent, radio in hand. "Captain," she said firmly, "I'm requesting a full inspection of the tail boom. Panel open, internal check." Rourke didn't miss a beat. Denied. "Why?" she asked, sharp but not disrespectful. "Because we're behind schedule, Lieutenant," he said. "This isn't a live op, it's a simulation. No civilians on board, no actual threat. It's not worth triggering a multi-adjacent delay over a hunch from a dog. That dog has found 3 live explosives in the last 8 months, she shot back, including one that your sensors missed. "I'm aware," Rourke replied evenly, "and I trust your judgment in most scenarios. But this isn't your call. This is my airfield, and unless there's visible sabotage or a confirmed systems failure, we don't disassemble aircraft over behavioral cues. Especially not during a drill. You'd rather risk flying an aircraft that might be compromised just because it's a simulation?" she asked. "Yes," he replied flatly, "because we're not risking anything. The Falcon isn't flying into conflict. We'll be in the air 30 minutes, tops. Escorts below, recovery protocols in place. This isn't Fallujah, Lieutenant. It's Minnesota in spring." She exhaled sharply, grinding her molars as she looked over at the Falcon again. The rotors were now fully armed. The hum of readiness in the air grated on her like static. Her eyes moved to the cockpit, where the co-pilot Devin Marks was reviewing his last-minute checklist. She didn't know him well, but he had a good reputation. Cautious, methodical. Still, even the best pilots couldn't control what they couldn't see. "Then let me do a passive inspection," she offered. "No panel opening, just a secondary scan with the portable spectrometer. 5 minutes, no contact, no tools." "You don't have time," Rourke said again. "This conversation's already pushing us beyond buffer." She looked at him steadily. "Then log that I formally protested flight clearance." "Already done," he replied. "But it won't change the launch unless you present hard data." "Fine," she said, her voice colder now. "Then I'll find it." She turned sharply and strode back toward the equipment shed, Axel at her side. Inside, the air was dry and fluorescent bright. She passed 2 junior techs organizing power cells and made her way directly to the maintenance terminal. A rugged tablet docked at a fixed station. She logged in using her security clearance and opened the Falcon 12's maintenance report again. The full log tree unfolded in front of her, each entry time-stamped and ID tagged. She tapped open the report for the tail boom replacement and began to scroll. Lines of jargon blurred as she scanned for inconsistencies, anything that stood out from the ordinary flow of procedure. Then she saw it. A log entry marked Final Torque Calibration Tail Assembly had a timestamp of 4:10 a.m. on April 10th. The rest of the entries around it were clustered between 11:20 a.m. and 3:00 p.m. on the same day. That 4:10 entry stuck out like a cracked tile in a perfect floor. She tapped it again, pulling up the access metadata. It had been last modified by an account ID ending in 92B. That wasn't Rails. That wasn't anyone on the registered Falcon 12 service team. She dug deeper, navigating to the user registry, her fingers moving faster now. ID 92B belonged to a technician named Marvin Kemp, not assigned to Falcon 12. In fact, he hadn't worked on any airframes for the past month. On leave pending a disciplinary review. And yet here was his ID attached to the most critical entry on this log, Final Torque Calibration. Either someone used his credentials or he had access when he shouldn't. Either way, it meant this log had been tampered with. And then she saw the revision history. Originally logged at 12:20 p.m., it had been edited, pushed back 8 hours, to 4:10 a.m. The shift made it look like a continuous maintenance session, uninterrupted, completed early. But that edit meant someone didn't want it to look like there was a break. Why? She copied the metadata to her own tablet and flagged the entry. Then she hit the intercom on the wall. "This is Lieutenant Brooks," she said. "You need Maintenance Coordinator Reyes to report to the East Equipment Shed. Priority 1. A moment later, Reyes entered, visibly irritated. "What now?" "I found a timestamped edit on the Falcon 12 log," she said, not bothering with small talk. Final torque calibration was falsified. Change from midday to pre-dawn. ID tags wrong, belongs to someone not on the active crew. That's impossible, Reyes said. Those systems are locked, dual authentication. We would have been alerted to a conflict. You weren't, she replied, because whoever made the change covered their trail. But they missed the metadata fingerprint. It's Kemp's ID. Kemp's on leave, he shouldn't have access to anything. Exactly. She stepped toward him. So either your system's compromised or someone on your team is using unauthorized credentials to hide a timeline gap. Reyes's jaw tightened. This is a simulation, Brooks, she countered. If this were a live op and that boom failed mid-air, we wouldn't be arguing about logs. We'd be picking up pieces from the forest floor. You can't ground it on metadata alone, Reyes said, voice low. Then I will, she replied, stepping past him. He caught her arm. Don't make this a career move you can't walk back from. She looked him dead in the eye. I already made it when I trusted my dog. She walked out before he could respond, Axel trotting silently beside her. As they emerged into the sunlight again, the Falcon 12's engine whine grew louder, nearly for takeoff. She saw Rourke in the distance, checking his watch, pacing. Lena moved faster now, heading straight for the control tent. She had just passed the second rotor when Axel suddenly stopped again, tail low, body shifting. She turned just as he veered off toward the tail section, again not with speed but with eerie, deliberate intention. The moment Lena stepped through the flap of the operations tent, the room fell briefly silent. 3 officers and 2 civilian contractors stood around the central mission table, their heads snapping up as she entered, her expression hard and unyielding, Axel trailing close behind her. On the far side of the room, Colonel Harlan Bishop turned slowly, tall and broad-shouldered, every inch the authoritative figure his title demanded. His graying temples framed a face carved by decades of combat command. Cold eyes, square jaw, posture like a steel beam. He had been briefed clearly. The scowl that waited for her wasn't born of confusion. It was the face of a man who had already made a decision. Lieutenant Brooks, he said, voice sharp enough to cut glass. You've caused quite the stir this morning. With respect, sir, Lena replied, standing tall. I believe this mission is at risk due to an overlooked maintenance breach. I've found altered logs, unauthorized credentials, and my canine partner has refused proximity to the aircraft twice. Bishop's mouth curled slightly at the corners, a smile that didn't touch his eyes. Area. And I've also read the diagnostics, listened to engineering, and spoken to aviation safety. All indicators say Falcon 12 is green. Your instincts are noted, but not enough to halt a federal joint exercise. Sir, she began again, firmer this time. A falsified maintenance log does not equate to confirmed sabotage, Bishop interrupted. Raising his hand, I don't like irregularities either, but the system doesn't get overturned on one officer's unverified map. Then verify it, she snapped, unable to stop herself before we put anyone in the air. Bishop's jaw tightened. He turned to the operations aide beside him. Lieutenant Brooks is hereby relieved of her field assignment for the remainder of today's operation. Log the incident as procedural interference pending review. You're grounding me? She asked, stunned but still composed. You're dismissing my security clearance over a concern for flight integrity? I'm removing an obstacle to operational efficiency, Bishop replied coldly. You've disrupted protocol, challenged 3 departments without a chain of command request, and now you're walking in here with conspiracy claims based on behavior from a dog. If you have evidence, submit it through formal post-exercise analysis. Until then, you are to stand down. Turn over your badge and sidearm. The order landed like a punch to the chest. Around her, no one said a word. One of the junior officers averted his gaze. Lena unclipped her sidearm from her belt, placing it carefully on the table. Her ID badge followed. She didn't argue. She didn't beg. She didn't explain again. There was nothing left to say that she hadn't already said twice, and louder. She turned to Axel and whispered. He, then, walked out of the tent, eyes fixed ahead, refusing to show the burning behind them. Outside, the sunlight had grown harder, sharper, casting long shadows from the Falcon's rotor blades that stretched like fingers across the tarmac. The launch team was moving with renewed pace, clearly briefed that her objections had been overruled. Lena walked past them without acknowledging a soul, her boots hitting pavement in perfect cadence. The ache in her chest had nothing to do with pride. It was fear, the kind of quiet, rational dread that didn't scream but whispered, "They're going to fly that thing and it's not safe." She passed the edge of the logistics zone, heading toward the personnel locker barracks where temporary assignments were staged. The building was low and flat, corrugated steel walls baking under the April sun. Inside, the cool air did nothing to lower her pulse. She sat on the bench near the far end, Axel settling beside her with a soft exhale. She pulled out her personal device, intending to write an incident memo, already drafting the structure of her report in her head. The screen blinked to life. One new message. No contact ID, no number. Just a simple, untraceable field inbox. 6 digits and a dash. She opened it. "You're right, don't let them fly." Her breath caught, chest tightening with sudden clarity. She stared at the words again, fingers hovering over the screen. The message had arrived 2 minutes ago, time-stamped. Whoever sent it had been watching. Whoever it was inside. She looked at Axel, who lifted his head at her shift in energy. "You feel that too, don't you?" she murmured. She tried replying. The return bounced instantly. No inbox found. She copied the message, screenshot it, encrypted it, and saved it under a dummy folder in her cloud archive. Then she stood. Her mind raced. If someone from inside the operation believed her, someone with access, then this wasn't just a sloppy maintenance job. This was active concealment. Sabotage, maybe? Cover-up, definitely. But she was off the team now, stripped of access. No chain of command, no support. Still, she had Axel. And the message. And if someone inside thought the aircraft was compromised badly enough to warn her anonymously, then she couldn't afford to sit on the sidelines. She crossed back through the barracks corridor, her steps quicker now. She didn't yet have a plan, but she had something better. Cause. She needed to find out who Kemp was working with, how that ID got used, and who had reason to stop Falcon 12 from launching. She needed access. She needed time. And most of all, Lena stepped back out into the sun with a purpose masked in nonchalance. Her posture relaxed, but her eyes calculating every movement on the flight line. She no longer wore her tactical vest, her sidearm was gone, and officially she had no access to the flight zone. But she wasn't finished, not yet. The anonymous message pulsed in her mind like a beacon. Someone knew she was right, someone inside, and if she couldn't stop the launch by chain of command, she'd have to find something that made stopping it undeniable. As she moved through the auxiliary equipment shed near the west edge of the tarmac, she stopped at a supply crate half covered by canvas. She pulled it back, revealing a tool roll with inspection mirrors, grip clamps, and a torque set, standard equipment for on-the-go adjustment. No one noticed her take it. Across the field, the Falcon 12 continued its pre-launch hum. Blades idle but armed. The crew in final preparation. It was now or never. She approached the aircraft from the blind side, where most of the attention had shifted to the forward fuselage. The crowd crews were checking comms and antenna mounts. The tail section stood largely unattended. Perfect. She dropped to one knee beside a low service hatch just ahead of the rear stabilizer. A maintenance access point she'd seen Rhea's log once but never open herself. She unrolled the toolkit behind her thigh and selected a 1/4-inch torque driver with a magnetized tip. Her fingers moved quickly, steady from muscle memory. She unscrewed the 4 recessed bolts and gently pried the cover back, keeping it low to avoid casting a visible reflection. The metal popped free with a soft clink. Inside, wires and control linkages stretched taut across a narrow cavity. She leaned closer, sweeping her fingers along the edge. Then she froze. The paint was chipped, faint, but present. And underneath it, bare aluminum gleamed through in jagged strokes that didn't match factory work. She recognized the marks instantly. Not wear and tear, not routine removal. This panel had been popped open, likely by a flat tool, and forced back in place with enough pressure to scar the rim. Unauthorized access. She breathed out slowly, fingers now tracing lower until they touched a fastener head near the servo assembly. The bolt looked clean, but the washer beneath it had the faintest scrape, something that suggested it had been loosened and not retorqued properly. She didn't have the diagnostics to prove misalignment, but she didn't need them. The tampering was real. The scarred panel, the mismatched washer torque, The time-stamped log falsified to show a seamless maintenance session. It all pointed to something deliberate. She reached into her pocket for the compact digital cam she always carried. One click, two. Close-up shots, time-stamped, geolocated. Just as she stood to replace the panel, a low rumble sounded behind her. Axel. She turned. He wasn't beside her. He had moved, silent and sure-footed, to the rear rotor assembly, nose almost pressed to the lower curve of the tail boom. His body had shifted into a semi-crouch, front paw forward, neck lowered, ears straight. That position meant only one thing: target detection. She moved quickly toward him, voice hushed. "What is it, buddy?" He didn't move his gaze. Instead, his nose pressed again against the lower junction, just above the secondary rotor linkage, exactly where the internal cables translated pilot input into directional tilt. She had checked this area earlier from the outside. Nothing had looked unusual, but now, seeing Axel's absolute focus, her heart quickened. He gave a low exhale, not a bark, not a whine, just a short, clipped breath that meant certainty. He'd found it. She knelt and examined the seam where the panel merged into the boom. The paint here, too, was subtly mismatched, newer, glossier. A repair coat, but the seam itself, imperfect, not factory straight. She pressed lightly and felt a faint give, almost imperceptible. That's when she noticed the rivets. 2 of them, in a row of 6, had different tooling patterns, slightly more pronounced, as if installed by a less experienced hand. Her mouth went dry. Tampering that deep inside a flight-critical component required access, precision, and knowledge. Whoever did this didn't just want to disable the aircraft, they wanted it to fail mid-flight. Slowly, after takeoff, when the pressure and torque would be high enough to tear the tail out of alignment. A malfunction here wouldn't show up in diagnostics, unless it had already begun to propagate under stress. It was a time bomb, dressed in clean rivets and false maintenance logs. Axel sat down beside her now, alert but calm, posture clear. This was the spot. The behavior lined up perfectly with his training. This wasn't residual odor from fuel. It wasn't nerves. It was alert. He confirmed it. She snapped more photos. She replaced the panel as quietly as she'd removed it, retightening the bolts in sequence. The roar of the main rotor spooling up behind them signaled a new urgency. Pre-launch sequence had begun. She glanced at her watch. 6 minutes to liftoff. No time for reports. No time for debate. The only thing left now was to get this evidence in front of someone who couldn't ignore it. She pocketed the cam, whispered, "Let's go," and moved fast, her mind spinning not just with what she'd seen, but with one chilling question. If someone was willing to let that helicopter go up like this, who exactly were they trying to bring down? Lena moved quickly across the tarmac, Axel keeping pace at her side, his body tense but composed, eyes scanning in tandem with hers. The noise from Falcon 12 had escalated. The turbine's whine now sliced through the air like a warning, the pre-liftoff checklist unmistakably in its final stages. Lena didn't bother trying to enter the command tent again. She already knew what would happen. Bishop had made his position clear, and any further direct protest would only entrench it. She needed another route, and for that she needed a face. Someone who could access the launch system internally. Someone not fully looped into Bishop's rigid hierarchy. As she rounded the corner toward the rear logistics area, a narrow service path lined with support carts and auxiliary fuel tanks, she saw a figure standing by one of the tool benches near the fence. Tall, wide-shouldered, arms crossed, his name surfaced in her memory faster than she expected. Derek Halver, one of the rotational maintenance staff, low profile, rarely vocal in meetings, but always present around the airframe during idle hours. She slowed slightly, and he turned to look at her. Their eyes locked for only a second, but something shifted in his expression, recognition laced with caution. He stepped toward her, a rag in one hand, a small hydrosealant bottle in the other. "Brooks," he said in a low voice, glancing at Axel, then over her shoulder. "You shouldn't be back here, and yet here I am," she replied flatly. "You're not on flight clearance anymore," he added. "Heard Bishop benched you. You watching me?" she asked. "You've been shadowing Falcon 12 since 6 a.m. "I maintain equipment," Derek replied carefully. "That includes watching it get handled wrong." She moved a step closer, lowering her voice. Something's off with that aircraft, and I think you know it. He stiffened slightly, jaw tightening. You need to let it go? Why? She asked. Because someone told you to keep quiet, or because you helped cover it up? You don't understand what's going on, Derek muttered. It's not your fight. You just saw me inspect that tail section, she said, daring him with her tone. And you didn't stop me until I was done. Why? He shook his head, voice lower now but sharp. Don't touch that part of the airframe again. You don't know what you're getting into. Then explain it, she demanded. Or I bring this straight to base command. Derek hesitated. It was the kind of pause that wasn't just fear, it was calculation. They'll never listen to you, he said finally. They'll sweep it, same way they've swept worse. You don't have the clearance to see the reports they've buried. Then maybe I'll dig them up, she said. Like yours. He blinked. What? You think I don't do my homework? She said, stepping back slightly and unlocking her personal tablet. Her fingers moved quickly, bringing up the internal personnel directory. 3 months ago, you were suspended for a week. Internal audit flagged your override logs on 2 maintenance reports. Claimed it was a system error, but the review board cited it as intentional misrepresentation of inspection time. Derek's shoulders squared, lips parting slightly. You dug through my record. It's public inside the system, she replied. Irrelevant, considering you're now protecting a launch that could kill someone. If you know that aircraft isn't safe and you stay silent, that's not just cowardice, it's complicity. His hand clenched around the rag. I never signed on for this. Then do something, she said. You're still in the system, you have access. Flag it. Lock the panel, delay launch just 5 minutes and I'll I can't, he said quickly. You don't know who's involved. Then tell me, she pressed. Give me a name, a reason. Derek looked around nervously. A fuel truck passed nearby, its rumble temporarily masking their voices. He leaned in. Falcon 12 was supposed to go to a different contractor, higher spec upgrades but more expensive. They lost the contract. Since then, there's been talk, whispers about proving current specs are unstable, that if something failed subtle enough, not fatal, it'd reopen the contract border. You're telling me this is about money? Lena asked, jaw tight. That someone would risk human lives just to discredit a contract? That's how it always starts, Derek muttered. But now it's bigger, someone's accelerated the plan. I don't know who, I didn't agree to this part. But you knew, she said. You saw the edits, the replacement parts, you kept quiet. Because I was warned, he said, his voice cracking slightly. Warned by someone who's already buried one mechanic's career for asking questions. Then help me expose it, she said. Or step aside. He said he was a real gun he posted on lineup, so that her mouth was as gunned as atoms could bear. He saw you pull that panel, Derek whispered. The rear one, if you found scratches, misaligned fasteners. That's enough, I can't stop the launch. But if you have photos, send them to Command Central Archive. There's a security officer there who still listens. Name's Vega, mid-level clearance. She was part of the post-crash inquiry at Fort Harmony. Give me her note address, Lena said. Derek scribbled it on a torn inventory slip and handed it to her. I never spoke to you. Sure, Lena replied. You didn't. He turned and walked away, back toward the line of tool benches, shoulders hunched. Lena looked at the note, then turned to Axel. We've got a route in, she said softly. Now let's see if we still have time. Lena wasted no time. She sprinted back toward the hangar bay where a secondary access to the Falcon 12's maintenance deck was located. Her hand gripping the slip of paper with Officer Vega's note address tightly, Axel trailing close behind her. Her mind raced with each step. Derek's information confirmed her worst fear. This wasn't an accident, and it wasn't a one-man oversight. The edits to the logs, the altered torque record, the replacement components, all of it pointed to a deliberate act of sabotage. And now she had a name, someone on the inside who could validate the evidence without going through the command bottleneck that had ignored her up to this point. But before she could risk sending out the photos to Vega, she needed something definitive. Not just scratched bolts or an anonymous warning, but proof that would hold in front of an entire board of inquiry. She needed to get inside that tail section fully. No distractions. No guesswork. The only person she could trust with tools and clearance at this point was the one technician who had never been involved in Falcon 12's direct assignments, Tasha Lang. Lena found her near the auxiliary power unit station, crouched over a crate of unused stabilizer fins. Tasha, Lena called, breath short. I need a second. Lang looked up, surprised. Aren't you grounded? Only officially, Lena said. Unofficially, I need your help opening a tail access panel right now. I have evidence of tampering, but I need your eyes to verify it. I don't need loyalty, I need your honesty. Lang stared at her for a beat, then stood slowly. What are we opening? Control box beneath the aft rotor assembly, Lena said. A hydraulic stabilization buffer. Lang raised an eyebrow. That's a sealed housing. Not anymore, Lena replied. They walked briskly across the staging area. No one stopped them. Everyone's focus was on the countdown. The flight crew had boarded. 2 communications officers stood by the mobile tower van, eyes on their tablets, ears to headsets. The mission was in motion. Lena and Lang approached the Falcon 12's left flank, staying low behind the curve of the airframe. Lang carried a compact torque rig and a portable inspection cam. Axel followed silently, his gaze still fixed forward. When they reached the tail boom, Lang crouched by the final access cover and ran her gloved fingers along the seam. You already touched this? She asked. Earlier, Lena replied. But I didn't open the final housing. Lang nodded and unscrewed the 6 security bolts quickly and efficiently. She passed the panel back to Lena and angled her inspection light inside. What they saw made Lang pause. Something's off here, she muttered. Give me a second. She extended the small camera wand into the cavity and began a slow sweep, pausing when the lens caught the linkage bracket near the inner rotation spindle. Zoom in, Lena said, squinting. Lang did. There, Lena pointed. That washer, look at the edge. The ring had a subtle but undeniable gouge pattern around its inner circumference, visible only under the high-definition lens. Lang leaned closer. That's not wear and tear, she said flatly. That's grime damage. Someone filed that ring down? What happens if that spacer gives way mid-flight? Lang didn't answer immediately. She traced the camera over the adjoining seals and then pulled the cam out, switching tools. Hold this, she said, handing Lena a clamp light. With practiced hands, she removed the washer with a micro grip and laid it on a portable analyzer pad. The pad blinked twice, then showed a pressure rating marked in red. This shouldn't be in service, Lang said. It's rated for under half the normal threshold. If the tail hits rotational peak, which it will within 30 minutes of flight, this would shear off. The blade pitch would slip out of sync and tail loss, Lena said, finishing the thought. Yes, Lang confirmed grimly. Probably mid-air structural failure. At best, they'd emergency land with full rudder override. At worst, free spin and total loss of control. Lena felt a chill run through her spine. That damage, it's not accidental, is it? Lang lifted the washer, turned it in her fingers, and held it under the light. The scratches were done with a diamond-edge rotary. Look how clean the arc is. Deliberate abrasion. Whoever did this knew exactly what force it would take to make the failure look incidental. Can you date the damage? Lena asked. Maybe, Lang said. If we compare the oil saturation layer on the ring to the degradation rate in this environment. She pulled out a test strip, dabbed the ring, and checked the monitor. Oil films less than 48 hours old. Lena's stomach dropped. That matches the timing of the falsified maintenance logs. Exactly, Lang said. So it happened recently. Not in general wear, not old hardware, and not before it was signed off as ready. Who was on duty 48 hours ago? Lena asked, though she already knew. Lang gave her a look. I checked the board yesterday. Derek pulled the night shift on this section. Of course he did, Lena muttered. But he warned me not to touch it, because he knew. Lang looked up sharply. Derek? He's the one who tampered with this. He claims he was pressured, Lena said. Said he didn't agree with it, but didn't stop it either. Lang held the washer up again, her face pale under the fluorescent wash. This is criminal sabotage, not negligence. This is engineered failure. I need you to send everything you just found, Lena said, urgency rising in her voice. Cam footage, readings, timestamp metadata. Send all of it to Officer Vega at Command Archive. She's the only one who'll take it seriously. I'll upload it now, Lang said. And what about you? I'm going to buy us just enough time to shut this launch down, Lena said, standing. However, I have. Lang's report uploaded in under 90 seconds. Her secured terminal linked through a private channel used for direct technical archives, pinged Vega's node with full diagnostics, photographic proof, and oil degradation analysis. Lena watched the progress bar climb like a countdown clock moving in reverse. Each completed megabyte a tighter noose around the neck of whoever thought the sabotage would remain invisible. As the final file hit Vega's server, Lang looked up and said, "Done. If she doesn't respond in 5, I'll ping the backup contact in logistics compliance." "Let's hope it doesn't come to that," Lena replied, already turning. She moved quickly back toward the command tent perimeter, where the internal security unit had now begun adjusting their formation, responding to the quiet storm of encrypted alerts triggered by Lang's upload. Someone inside had clearly seen the file and elevated the alert to Command Investigation Protocol. She didn't have to wait long. 2 officers in dark gray utility gear approached her near the fuel staging area, tactical sergeants assigned to Bayside security, not affiliated with Falcon Crew or Air Operations. One of them, a tall man with a badge clipped to his vest labeled "Done," held out his hand as he spoke into his comm. "Lieutenant Brooks," he said, not asking, just confirming. She nodded. "You're being requested in Processing Bay 2. Central Review has flagged a high-risk breach involving aircraft sabotage. Your evidence submission was received and escalated. We'll escort you." "What about the launch?" she asked. "Falcon 12 has been grounded pending secondary inspection," he said. "No takeoff today." The words hit harder than she expected. Relief came slow, like a muscle unclenching after hours of tension. She looked down at Axel, who met her gaze calmly, as if to say, "Finally." As they moved through the corridor toward Processing Bay 2, another security officer passed them briskly in the opposite direction, his radio spitting fragments. "Detain Halver, bring him to interview room 4. Derek had been found." Lena didn't ask how. She didn't need to. By the time she entered the room, he was already seated, wrists loosely cuffed to a desk bracket, his expression more tired than defiant. He looked up as she entered, his eyes bloodshot but steady. The lead investigator, Captain Alton Vega, stood at the end of the table, her badge flashing under the overhead light. She gestured for Lena to take a seat, and then tapped the recording pad. "You're recording Investigation Log 482B. Initial subject, Halver, Derek James. Present, Captain Vega, Lieutenant Brooks. Halver has been read rights and has agreed to an open statement. Begin." Derek exhaled. "I never meant to hurt anyone," he started. "I need that on record. What I did, I was told it would be minor, cosmetic, something that would get flagged and then fixed." Vega's voice was cool. "By whom?" "A rep from an outfit called Delta Systems Maintenance," he said. "Private contractor. They used to supply stabilizer assemblies to Elwood Airfield until 3 months ago." Lena recognized the name immediately. DSM had been one of the final competitors in the bid for airframe upgrades. Overpriced, bloated specs, and too many failed QA flags. Their contract had been pulled and rerouted to the current in-house team. "And they contacted you directly?" Vega asked. "Not exactly," Derek said. "Got approached off a guy knew my name, my job history. Said there were people watching what happened with the contract. Said the current unit wasn't as safe as everyone thought, and that if a non-lethal failure occurred, it would justify a contract reevaluation." "What did they ask you to do?" Vega continued. "Remove a washer," Derek said. "File it down slightly. Not enough to snap, just enough to fail under stress. Make it look like fatigue." Lena couldn't stop the disgust in her tone. "And you believed that wouldn't hurt anyone?" "It was supposed to trigger early in testing," Derek said, sounding desperate now. "Worst case, a precautionary landing. No one on board. They said everything would be simulated." "And the money?" Vega asked. "They offered $8,000. Said it would be split between installments. No direct deposit, just pay cards. But we found the deposit," Vega said. "Bank trace shows $8,000, 0 cents sent to your account 3 days ago, routed through a holding company in Cyprus. Offshore blind shell. You used the card to buy gear at the military surplus store downtown yesterday." Derek's expression collapsed. "I didn't know they'd wire it. I didn't ask for that. They said it would be off books." "Did they threaten you?" Vega asked. He hesitated. "Yeah, once. Said if I didn't cooperate they'd flag my earlier suspension to the FAA certification board. I'd be barred from any future aviation tech work." "You already had a mark on your record," Lena said quietly. They exploited that, but you still made a choice. Derek nodded. I know. I just thought it wouldn't get this far. Vega turned to Lena. You've done enough. We'll extract all digital files from the Falcon logs next. Maintenance review, CCTV, entry codes. Internal Affairs has already notified Department of Defense Procurement. Do we know who else in DSM might be connected? Lena asked. We have names, Vega replied. We're coordinating with federal contractors' compliance. But your evidence, especially the washer damage and Axel's alert, was the trigger. Without that, this would have gone up with the bird. Lena didn't reply. She just looked at Derek again. No anger, just the weight of everything they both now knew. He sank lower in his seat, resigned. Vega ended the recording. We'll keep you posted on outcomes, she said. But for now, thank you. Lena stood, nodding once, and exited the room with Axel at her heel. The corridor outside was quiet, except for the distant sound of rotors winding down in the hangar bay. The Falcon 12 would be grounded for days, maybe weeks. But more importantly, it wouldn't be going up today. The investigation report was submitted within 48 hours. By the time Lena returned to the airfield on the morning of the third day, the name Falcon 12 had already become a silent lesson repeated in every hangar, every inspection bay, and every leadership meeting across the division. Command had issued a temporary halt to all non-critical flights, and a memo had gone out from Central Review ordering a re-evaluation of inspection integrity protocols on all future simulation flights. The ripple of what almost happened had spread wide and fast, but none of it changed the fact that the person responsible for stopping it stood quietly outside the main administration building, her boots planted firmly, her canine partner sitting patiently at her side. Lena hadn't asked for reinstatement, but it came before she had the chance. The call came directly from Colonel Bishop's replacement, Commander Elias Monroe, a man with a background in both field operations and aviation safety. He didn't wait for a report, didn't demand explanations. He simply said, "We owe you an apology, and we'd like to correct that with action, not words." Lena was reauthorized for duty within hours, her clearance reinstated, her access restored, her record amended with a note of commendation for independent judgment, under procedural constraint. But that wasn't what mattered to her. What mattered was the animal beside her, the one who had caught what no sensor did, the one who trusted her even when no one else did, and the base knew it too. That's why, on the following Friday, under the open spring sky, a ceremony was held on the Western Parade Field at Elwood Airfield. The sun was out but gentle, casting soft light across the concrete as dozens of personnel stood in formation. Officers from nearly every division were present. Tactical, aviation, logistics, engineering, and a small stage had been set up near the hangar doors, adorned with 2 flags and a single podium. Lena stood beside Axel, both of them in formal uniform. He wore his tactical vest cleaned and polished, but this time there was a velvet box secured to his collar. She didn't know what was in it, not officially. All she had been told was that Command wanted to acknowledge service. Commander Monroe stepped up to the mic. His posture was formal but relaxed. His voice steady, his presence quiet but commanding. He began with a brief overview of the incident, what had happened, what had almost happened, and how one decision, made outside of protocol, had changed the outcome. Then he turned to face Lena and Axel. "Lieutenant Brooks," he said, "you placed your career on the line for a principle most overlooked, intuition born of partnership. And you placed your trust in a partner who cannot speak, who cannot write reports, but who, on that morning, was more accurate than any checklist we had. You were right to listen." A light breeze lifted the flags behind him as he gestured to a side table, where a senior officer stepped forward with a small black box. Monroe opened it. Inside lay a silver medal on a deep blue ribbon, engraved not with a name, but with the silhouette of a K9 in mid-stride and the words "Valor and Service." He clipped it gently to Axel's vest, then stepped back as the audience broke into respectful applause. It wasn't thunders, it wasn't for show. It was the kind of applause born from understanding, from every soldier, pilot, and mechanic who had ever relied on more than just code and steel. Then Monroe raised his hand, signaling quiet, and said the line that would stay with everyone there long after the sun had set. "He can program every machine," he said, his voice carrying, "but trust, real trust, can only be taught through loyalty. And this dog has done what no machine could. He saved lives because he believed in his handler. The field was silent for a beat, then another wave of applause followed, louder this time with a few whistles from the rear lines. Lena looked down at Axel. He wasn't wagging his tail. He didn't understand medals or speeches, but he stood there, still and proud, like he always did. Not for the attention, not for reward, but because that was the job. That was the bond. Later that afternoon, Lena walked the perimeter road behind the hangars, Axel beside her, the air quiet and warm, the day already fading toward evening. They didn't say much, never needed to. She ran a hand over his back, fingers brushing the edge of his metal. "You know," she said softly, "you're the reason a lot of people are still breathing, not me." He looked up at her, ears twitching, tongue flicking out just once. She smiled. "Let's go home." Behind them, the airfield was still humming. Crews moving equipment, new arrivals checking in. But Falcon 12 remained in Hangar 4, engine cold, tail rotor exposed, inspection teams still crawling over every inch. And no one questioned anymore why the launch had been stopped. No one called her overcautious. And no one, ever again, underestimated what a dog could know that humans couldn't. The story would circulate for years, told in break rooms and barracks, taught in training modules, retold to new recruits. But for Lena and Axel, it wasn't about the story. It was about a morning, a decision, and a bond that never broke, even when every system said go and only one heart said stop. If stories like this one move you, stories of instinct, loyalty, and quiet heroism, consider subscribing to the channel for more. We tell real, grounded tales that remind us what trust truly looks like. Where in the world are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below. We'd love to know how far this story has traveled. And tell us, what moment stood out to you the most? Was it when Axel pulled Lena back from the helicopter? Or the quiet ceremony at the end? Let's talk about it below.